For more than 100 years, Americans have depended on thick comforters, layered mattresses, and central heating systems to get through winter. Yet earlier generations sleeping in uninsulated cabins, drafty barracks, and rough frontier shelters often maintained warmth more effectively than many do today. This episode examines the forgotten blanket system that carried families, soldiers, and settlers through severe winters, without electricity, synthetic insulation, or modern climate control. We're going to break down why contemporary bedding sheds heat more quickly than it seems, the traditional layering method that seals warmth more efficiently than many sleeping bags, how wool, cotton, and quilts function together as a self-regulating thermal system, why body heat drains into the ground first, and how to block that loss immediately, and the survival logic that can transform an ordinary bed into a passive heat shelter during outages and winter storms. This is not romanticism. It is field-tested thermal science, refined across generations and still highly effective under the right conditions. So, the central misunderstanding here is confusing comfort with insulation. Modern beds are really designed around softness and ergonomic support. They basically assume a stable indoor temperature. Heating systems are just expected to compensate for any inefficiencies in bedding. But if you remove the heat source, the weakness of that design becomes pretty obvious. 19th century Americans, on the other hand, did not build their sleep systems around room temperature. Cabins leaked air, and barracks were unheated or, honestly, just poorly heated. Fireplaces would burn down at night, leaving the space cold. The environment simply could not be trusted, so warmth had to be engineered directly around the body. The crucial principle was not really thickness, but air control. Insulation actually works by trapping still air and minimizing heat transfer. The more effectively that air is contained, the warmer the sleeper remains. Military campaigns revealed that heat loss below the body is the real threat. During the War of 1812 and later in the American Civil War, winter encampments exposed a recurring problem. Soldiers wrapped tightly in blankets still woke chilled. The reason was conduction. Cold ground continuously absorbs body heat. No amount of layering above compensates for direct contact with frozen earth. Even in modern homes, mattresses placed over cold floors allow gradual downward heat transfer when rooms are unheated. Experienced soldiers adapted. One blanket was placed beneath the body before any were laid on top. If only a single blanket was available, it was folded to double thickness under the torso. Straw, brush, pine boughs, or spare clothing were added whenever possible to create separation from the ground. Blocking downward heat loss immediately improved overall warmth. The ground was actually the primary drain. Once insulated from it, the body required far less energy to maintain temperature. Wool functioned as a structural insulator, not just a covering. The dominance of wool in 19th century bedding was not accidental. Its fibers contain natural crimps that trap microscopic pockets of air. That trapped air provides insulation. Unlike cotton, which flattens and conducts heat when damp, wool maintains loft and continues to insulate even after absorbing moisture vapor. This made it invaluable in unpredictable climates. During the Napoleonic Wars and later in the Crimean War, reports frequently noted the difference in resilience between wool and plant-based fabrics. Damp cotton drew heat away rapidly. Wool remained functional. In civilian households, quilts layered over wool blankets enhanced this effect. Cotton batting added loft. Wool stabilized moisture. Multiple thin layers trapped successive bands of still air. Together, they created what can fairly be described as a thermal ecosystem. Each layer moderated the next. Tight wrapping created a controlled pocket of warm air. The historical blanket system was deliberate. It was not a loose drape thrown over a mattress. First came insulation beneath the body. Then a wool blanket wrapped closely around the sleeper. A quilt or second blanket sealed the top. Edges were tucked along the sides or partially under the body to limit airflow. The goal was containment. Once the body warmed the enclosed air, that heat remained largely within the sealed pocket. Because the air volume was small and relatively still, maintaining warmth required minimal additional energy. This traditional layering method often seals warmth more effectively than modern sleeping bags because it adapts to available materials and body position. It is modular and adjustable without breaking the seal entirely. The principle is simple: reduce air exchange, trap still air, and prevent heat from escaping downward. Contemporary bedding often depends on external heat to function well. Large comforters and thick mattresses perform adequately in climate-controlled homes. But, they assume the surrounding air will remain warm. During power failures or winter storms, when indoor temperatures drop, the limitations of that system appear quickly. Oversized bedding leaves gaps. Air circulates freely. Heat escapes laterally and downward. The sleeper becomes responsible for reheating that lost air continuously. In contrast, the historical blanket method reduces the space that must be warmed. Smaller, enclosed volumes retain heat more efficiently. Containment replaces dependency on external heating. The difference lies not in materials alone, but in design logic. Moisture control was treated as a discipline rather than an afterthought. In drafty cabins and encampments, humidity fluctuated constantly, breath condensed on walls, clothing became damp during daily labor. Before sleep, outer garments were often removed and replaced with drier layers. Entering the blanket system dry was essential. Wool's ability to absorb vapor gradually without collapsing made it especially suited to this environment. It buffered moisture instead of transmitting cold directly to the skin. This logic honestly mirrors modern survival training. Dry insulation performs, damp insulation fails. The 19th century bedding system worked because users understood and respected that boundary. During blackouts and winter storms today, the same rule applies. Managing moisture can determine whether warmth stabilizes or steadily declines. Elevation and separation from cold surfaces were prioritized over softness. During winter quarters in the American Revolutionary War and later conflicts, soldiers built bedding platforms from straw, brush, or wooden planks. The objective was thermal separation. Even modest elevation creates air gaps that reduce conductive heat loss. Organic materials compress, but still trap insulating air. Combined with wool layering, this, honestly, drastically improved warmth. The lesson still holds true today. A firm insulated base really does outperform a soft but conductive one when you're dealing with cold conditions. Over time, armies went ahead and formalized these hard-earned lessons. As military logistics matured during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, standardized ground sheets and insulated pads started showing up in official issue. But these developments didn't actually replace the earlier knowledge, they institutionalized it. Modern modular sleep systems, well, they trace their lineage directly back to the blanket roll practices from earlier campaigns. The physics behind it all didn't change. Equipment just became more specialized. The foundational insight that insulation beneath and controlled airspace around the body preserve heat remained constant. The broader lesson is about context, not nostalgia. The 200-year-old blanket trick outperforms many modern beds under cold, unheated conditions because it addresses the primary avenues of heat loss directly: conduction to the ground, convection from moving air, and evaporative cooling from moisture. It does not rely on electricity. It does not assume a stable room temperature. It creates a contained thermal zone using simple materials. Modern bedding solves different problems. It emphasizes comfort in climate-controlled spaces. The historical system prioritized resilience in unstable environments. When conditions shift during storms, outages, or field situations, the older logic often proves more adaptable. Earlier generations observed environmental cause and effect closely because the consequences were immediate. Understanding their methods restores practical knowledge that remains useful. If this kind of careful, grounded historical analysis matters to you, subscribe to Hidden in History. And if this episode sharpened your understanding of how something as simple as a blanket can become a life-preserving tool, share it with someone who believes the past still has practical lessons to offer.